Hello everyone, my name is Artem Medvedev. You're listening to News and Views on Duke Radio. As some of you would have noticed, there was no new show last week, and that is due to the fact that I started teaching a new course at the Faculty of Extension, and a new course is always a very busy time. And one of the topics that I'm discussing with my students, and this is not just my idea, this is actually something in the textbook, is how we can eliminate poverty. And I'm teaching a group of international students. None of them are originally from Canada. And if you only knew how hard it is to answer their questions and try to talk to them about reasons why there can be poverty in a country like Canada. Questions like this abound, and they just cannot understand, coming from a different background and coming from a different social and political and economic situation, how we can have homeless and unemployed people in Canada, how there can be poverty in our country. And, it really gets you thinking as to why would we have poverty and things like that in 21st century Canada, and why does our government care nothing for resolving any of these issues? And news came out just this week about Flaherty once again showing that he has absolutely no idea what he's talking about when he's giving his numbers. So if the situation in the world gets better, he changes his numbers for the better. If the situation changes for the worse, he changes his forecast again for the worse. So he's similar to a very amateur weatherman who looks out of the window on a Monday morning and tries to use that to forecast the weather for Friday evening. Just recently, it's been 6 months of the Tory majority, and I will come back to that in just a few minutes, but I first wanted to start you off with some numbers to think about, some things that came out just this week. First of all, in spite of the rosy pictures that were being drawn by Flaherty and Harper, almost 72,000 full-time jobs were lost last month. That's just full-time jobs. This does not account for part-time jobs. This does not account for the fact that many people who did find work in the past month only found a part-time job, which is temporary and which does not guarantee any stability for families in the long term. Veterans Affairs reports that they're about to lose $226 million from their funding. And the government is trying to pretend that this is not going to affect any of the veterans' health services and community services, but Veterans Affairs, the people that actually administer all these services, are not so sure. $226 million is certainly a lot of money. The new Auditor General, the new future Auditor General, will spend his first year on the job learning French. And, just to add injury to insult, the Harper conservatives think that this is okay, that in a bilingual country we will have a person that cannot speak French in a major position, and that this person, instead of doing their job as an Auditor General for the next 12 months, they're going to be taking French classes, and then the rest, whatever is left, will be for the auditing process. And one more piece of old news about Stephen Harper is that in spite of the new casualty in Afghanistan, he still claims that he was right all along. Now only he claims that he's been saying that the training mission in Afghanistan was dangerous all along. If you look at some old recordings of what he was saying about the training mission in Afghanistan, you got the picture that there will be absolutely zero chance of anyone getting hurt in Afghanistan. So now even Stephen Harper confesses that that cannot be true. So to come back to the issue of 6 months of Tory majority, and I'd like to thank a number of bloggers that have been very helpful in putting together these lists of what has been accomplished by the Conservative government in the past 6 months. So here's a brief list, just to get you thinking about this, just to recall some of the best achievements of the Harper Conservatives. 10 days after the election, Flaherty already reneged on some of the Tory campaign promises for cutting down on the deficit. 10 days is all that it took. 3 failed Tory candidates were appointed to the Senate, and of course we should expect more such patronage appointments in the future. The largest cabinet in Canadian history was appointed with at least $9 million in salaries. The staffer of Minister Jason Kenney, who was fired amid much scandal for sending a Tory donation letter on MP letterhead, was hired within a month after the election again into the same office to the same position. The Auditor General, the previous Auditor General, released in June a report of waste of at least $50 million on gazebos, bathrooms, up to 100 kilometers away from the G20 site last year. Stephen Harper and his daughter spent $19,000 taxpayer dollars to fly to Vancouver for a Stanley Cup Finals game. $19,000 out of our pockets to have Stephen Harper and his daughter watch some hockey live. Statistics Canada reported that the poverty rate in Canada went up for the first time in the last decade and is now at 10%. 1 out of 10 Canadians is now in poverty. And I have very difficult time even explaining this to myself, leave alone explaining this to students from other countries as to how, in a country like Canada, we can have 10% living in poverty today. That's completely impossible. To make the financial operation of the Conservative government easier, 687 financial watchdog auditors were fired this summer. Probably they were just doing their job way too well. The back-to-work legislation against Canada Post workers made them go back to work for smaller wages than the Canada Post itself had suggested. Thus, the postal workers were punished for using their constitutional right to strike. Of course, this is a big symbol for everyone else in the future whose contract is going to expire, who might think of using their human rights. At a time when many Canadians are still out of stable employment, the Canadian government decided to spend $1.5 million on William and Kate's visit to Canada. Also, in the past 6 months, facts have become known to the whole world that Canada keeps exporting asbestos, although it is not using asbestos at home for health reasons. Statistics Canada reported that Canada now has the lowest crime rate since 1973. At the same time, since Stephen Harper came to power, prisons have been costing Canadians 86% more. At the time of great unemployment and instability, Harper declared that the biggest threat to Canadians is not unemployment or violation of civil rights, but Islamicism. Facts were revealed that Peter MacKay and dozens of other officials have wasted millions on Challenger flights that cannot be accounted for as official business. $12 million is going to be spent on commemorating the War of 1812. Nothing is going to be spent on commemorating the war in Afghanistan ending. And 3 pieces of information about what the Conservatives have done in the 6 months after getting majority, I think show the exact pinnacle of hypocrisy and cynicism that we should expect from this government going forward. First of all, a private consultant, as you remember, was hired for $90,000 a day to help the government find out which social programs should be cut next year. At the same time, Minister John Baird ordered gold-embossed business cards without a Canada logo and without French instead of the cards that were provided to him. And finally, Minister Raitt decided that economy should be declared an essential service to prevent any future labor disruptions. And this is just a partial list of what Stephen Harper and his party have been able to accomplish in the first 6 months of their majority government. Thinking about what the future steps of this government will bring is something that you should not do before bedtime. And just to give you a brief announcement, we're trying to get the NDP leadership hopefuls to give some short interviews to the show. And thus, if you have some interesting questions that you would like to be asked of the NDP leadership hopefuls, please send them in. And if you are an NDP leadership hopeful, please get in touch or respond to my many emails. I'm very easy to find on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Blogger. You can also get in touch with me through the Leduc Radio phone number and website. And at this, have a great day. My name is Artem Medvedev. You are listening to News on News on Leduc Radio.